You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and deputy political editor at The Spectator, Katy Balls. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. D-Day 4 p.m. Will more U-turns save our economy? Asked the front of the Daily Express as Liz Truss's economic policies continue to be scrutinised. The front of the Daily Mirror reflects the same story as they look at the Tory MPs who publicly told the Prime Minister to quit. The Daily Telegraph also looks at the same story, this time quoting Penny Mordaunt in their headline, "We need stability, not a soap opera." The front of the Daily Mail reads, "Plot to topple Truss this week." Tories hold secret talks on crowning new leader, reads The Times, as they too look at potential rebels within the Tory party. And the front of The Guardian also runs with this story. Their headline, "Truss fights for survival," as Tory rebel MPs warn that the game is up. Tories in Truss turmoil, the plots thicken, is the front of the Metro. And the Eye also leads with this story. Their headline, "Truss faces challenge within days." And in other news, the front of the Daily Star looks at plans to sell the late Queen's horses. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Katy Balls. Welcome to you both. Let us start with the Mirror. Only really one story on the front page, but I'm wondering whether you believe the Prime Minister will take the advice of certain Tory MPs, which is to quit now. Zoe?
I mean, she's not going to quit, OK? If she were going to quit, she would have quit already. So it will have to be a regicide, but commentators have already said it's not going to be a regicide, it's going to be euthanasia. She's dying on her feet. She can't actually get anything through this parliament. So the notion of her being in charge is not just destabilizing for the country, it's very destabilizing for the markets, it's very destabilizing for everybody. She's like manifestly not in charge of the party. I think, and I really hate saying this because, it's very, very problematic to say I speak on behalf of the nation, but I think the country has had enough of the Conservative Party deciding what's right and what's wrong. I mean, it's absolutely had enough. They put these clowns in charge and we have this turmoil, and then they put another clown in charge. So my sense is that if they don't have a general election soon, after they depose Liz Truss, they're going to be in really serious trouble.
What's your view, Katy? Do you agree with Zoe that the Prime Minister is unlikely to resign?
Yes, I mean, I think everything suggests that the Prime Minister is digging in. I think Liz Truss has shown throughout her career too that she is someone who often, in a way, she is a fighter. And I think in this case, lots of Tory MPs probably wish she was not. But I don't think Downing Street is going to walk away from this one without trying. And therefore in for, I think, a pretty unpredictable few days and weeks in terms of how this plays all out. And as Zoe says, you have a situation where, although I think now lots of MPs agree that they no longer want Liz Truss to be their leader, there's no consensus on who actually they should replace Liz Truss with. And therefore, you don't actually have a plan. You have a situation where you could actually create an already very messy situation, make it even more chaotic. And then the calls for a general election are only going to grow further. Though, of course, MPs do need to vote for one. And at the moment, I think most Tory MPs would look at the polls and think that that's the last thing they want to do.
Mm. Zoe, read in the Daily Mail that mutinous backbench MPs are pressing Tory shop steward Sir Graham Brady to tell the Prime Minister her time is up or change party rules to allow an immediate vote of confidence in her leadership. And we also read that former Minister Kristen Blunt has said the game is up. It's now a question as to how to manage the succession.
I mean, look, it's extraordinary, right? In the Tories' ideal world, nobody would know the name Graham Brady. They just wouldn't know who he was, and it wouldn't matter whether or not he was on holiday in Greece. This is a Tory nightmare that everything is hanging on the chair of the 1922 committee, because what it means is that everybody's waiting to see whether he will do something extraordinary, change the rules so that her leadership can be challenged within the first 12 months of her taking power, or whether he'll just sit on his hands. It's really much more problematic than I think even the Tory MPs, who are leaking like a ship, leaking like a leaky thing, are admitting. It's really extraordinary that we even can see so much into the way they operate is extraordinary. Now, the problem with leaving it to the Tory party is that none of the factions agree. So you've got the Mordaunt challenge, and the fact that she's being so open is quite salient, I think, here. Then you've got the Ben Wallace safe pair of hands challenge. Then you've got the kind of randoms from the right. Then you've got the people, the kind of commentariat saying, wouldn't it be great if Jeremy Hunt was in charge because he seems so calm and reasonable and empathetic. Now, if they could coalesce behind one of those options, they might have a chance of keeping this kind of limping government on. But they can't coalesce. So what you're seeing is actually like Brexit all over again. None of them can agree, so it's going to end up in chaos.
Yeah, and we have a look at the Telegraph next, and Penny Mordaunt, who's written about this, is saying that what they need now is stability and not a soap opera. She still seemingly supporting the Prime Minister, but as we know, she was a rival, and it seems as if she might be keeping that avenue open, Katy.
Yes, Penny Mordaunt is being talked up as part of this, and I'm using quote marks here, dream ticket going around Tory MPs of Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt. So I think it's interesting that in her role as leader of the House, she's written this op-ed in support of Liz Truss. It's also quite interesting because if we just go back a week or two to Tory party conference, Penny Mordaunt was one of the members of those attending cabinet who was actually speaking out quite liberally, going further than Number 10 would have liked. So, for example, Penny Mordaunt gave an interview where she said she thought benefits should rise in line with inflation, which went further than government policy at the time. And that caused, I think, issues, with up above. And therefore, there is clearly an effort to say, let's all be loyal, even if the past few weeks have been quite loose. I think it's an interesting one in terms of where this all goes and how this week plays out. There's lots of MPs who are saying there will be a challenge this week, and if it's not this week, it'll be next week. We cannot keep going as things are. But then you also have MPs, Matt Hancock, Rob Halfon, others today, going out in the media and saying they're very unhappy, but they're not at the point where they're going to call for Liz Truss to go yet. And as ever with these things, it's all about timing, which might also explain why some members of Cabinet want to seem loyal, at least for the time being.
Interesting. The Metro, they tell us that the plots, plural, thicken. Plot 1, Rebels want Sunak Mordaunt ticket. Plot 2, others want Ben Wallace. And plot 3, the Chancellor is tipped for the top job. Many saying, actually, now that the Prime Minister is in office, but not effectively in power, Zoe.
So the Robert Halfon point that, Katy very elegantly made, that, there are a number of people who are really saying very critical things, but they're not ready to make the final leap. But I actually see it a different way. Robert Halfon is openly saying he's making the most extraordinary analogies between Liz Truss and her policies and, jihadist terrorism, fundamentalism of the most extreme kind. So even if he's not saying directly, I think she should go, he's sort of saying she should go, whichever way you cut it. I think what will happen in the splice is that Jeremy Hunt will get the support of the kind of mainstream press, and probably that will sweep in the kind of Daily Mail Express view of things. I think the Mordaunt Sunak ticket is the one Tory insiders want, and I think Ben Wallace is the one that they kind of lean towards when they're trying to still look like they've got control of events. To my mind, it doesn't actually matter which of those tickets they go on, because the policies will be the same either way. Their problem will remain. They don't have a mandate. And the very fact that they've got these kind of competing candidates for a safe pair of hands just illustrates how little of a mandate they have. All they've got a mandate for is somebody preventing chaos. They don't have a mandate for anybody doing policy or government.
Zoe and Katy, for the moment, thank you. And the Daily Express detailing that Trussonomics is well and truly dead. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that after the break. But coming up, more, including this story on the front of the Daily Mail, where headline, hundreds of disgraceful Met officers should be booted out. Stay with us for more on that story and others. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and deputy political editor at The Spectator, Katy Balls. Let us have a look at the Daily Mail front page, and moving away from politics for the moment. This story about disgraced, or actually the headline is disgraceful Met officers, and the fact that they should be booted out of the force because of being accused of crimes including sexual assault, domestic abuse, corruption and fraud. This is all coming out in a review published tomorrow. Zoe.
It's really funny with the Met, right? Because we have this is a really live issue with Guardian readers, because we have this column called Dining Across the Divide, and one of the questions is, are the Met institutionally sexist? So it's a really live discussion, and you hear a lot of different views. And at root, it comes down to, will this work itself out over time, or does change need to come from the top? And I think it's pretty self-evident that it won't work itself out over time. You know, society has really moved on. Some of the stuff that's come out about the things going on in the Met WhatsApp groups are so far behind where we are, what we consider to be acceptable, that it's really obvious they're not moving on. And whether that's because the kind of institutional culture is rotten, whether that's because people are attracted to authoritarian roles who refuse to conform to, societal norms. Whatever the reason is, there needs to be some kind of root and branch change. And it's a really easy go-to, in a way, to say the Wayne Couzens affair, the Wayne Couzens crime and murder suggests that they need to change. That's not where I would start. I would say that was an abhorrent, appalling crime. But, this overall culture, whether it results in crime or not, needs to be tackled from the top.
Katy, are you convinced that there will be change? We have the Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, saying that the officers involved are undermining the integrity of the force and should be sacked. Does that signal to you that change is afoot?
I mean, it's almost stating the obvious to say that it's undermining the profession, and also to say that these people should be sacked. I mean, obviously, this is the person in charge. They haven't been in that position for so long. So you would expect some consequences to come from this. I think, as Zoe touches on, not just the case she mentioned, but just generally speaking, from recent reports on various ways police have treated women in the media, the figures sadly don't become as particularly surprising that this seems to be an institutional widespread problem. But I think it's one thing saying there's a problem is obviously quite a different one, having any evidence to point to that you're really taking the stance of pushing these people out of the profession.
Zoe, let's have a look at the Times and potentially a very good news story. Vaccines to fight cancer could be widely available before 2030.
I mean, look, there is an element that we're also desperate for some good news, that anything would look like good news. But yeah, of course, this is extraordinary news. And the oncologists always said that when we disaggregated one cancer from another, then we'd start to understand it properly. And that does seem to be what's happened here, that you know, we've started to understand that it's not one disease, and that has contributed to the development of a kind of broad spectrum vaccine. Plus the fact, of course, that, you know, the speed of the COVID vaccine, I think, has really put some firepower under what's possible and how fast it can happen.
Zoe and Katy, we have run out of time. Thank you both for taking us through the newspapers. We'll see you in the next hour. Thank you.